The first time Ryan told me I was dramatic, I was coughing up blood in the back of a Walgreens parking lot. He didn't believe me then either. Maybe I don't blame him. I used to fake headaches just to make him drive me home after soccer practice, pretend to limp just to feel his arm around me. But this time I wasn't acting. Ryan Mitchell was the kind of guy who lived like the world owed him nothing and he owed nothing back. He laughed loud, cursed louder, and loved like it was a competition he refused to lose. We met in high school him, the star athlete with a smile that could light up a stadium. Me, the art kid who could barely talk to my own reflection. For years, we danced around each other. Not exactly friends, not exactly enemies. He teased me. I pretended not to care. But college changed everything. Different cities, different lives. Then one random night, he texted me out of nowhere. "Heard you're in the hospital. Is this another one of your jokes?" And that was how it started. Again. By the time he showed up, I'd already been there 3 days. The smell of disinfectant clung to the air like bad perfume. My roommate's heart monitor beeped in lazy rhythm, matching the slow drip of the 4 attached to my arm. When Ryan walked in, everything felt too bright, too sharp, like the universe had just turned on the contrast to remind me he was real. "Jesus, Noah," he muttered, setting the flowers down awkwardly at the foot of the bed. "You look like shit." I smiled weakly. "You came." "Yeah, well, you texted me like you were dying." I laughed. It hurt. "That's because I am dying, Ryan." He rolled his eyes. "Don't start with that melodramatic crap again." But his voice wavered, just slightly. And I saw a crack in his armor, the part of him that still remembered the night I told him I loved him, and he'd laughed like it was a joke I'd told too well. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I had plans, you know? Finish art school. Get out of the small town that swallowed people whole. Maybe see Ryan again under different skies, where our past didn't hang like smoke between us. But the diagnosis came like a punchline to a cruel joke. Acute leukemia. Late stage. When you're 24, you think time bends for you. Turns out it doesn't. It breaks. Ryan stayed longer than I expected that first night. He didn't say much, just sat beside me while I dozed off, the sound of rain pattering against the window. At some point, I felt his hand warm, hesitant cover mine. I wanted to tell him that I didn't fake anything, that this wasn't some desperate stunt to pull him back into my life. But words felt heavy, unnecessary. His silence said more than enough. The next morning, he was gone. Days turned into weeks. The treatments started, the nausea came, and everything blurred into a cycle of beeping monitors and white walls. Sometimes, I'd catch myself reaching for my phone, half expecting a text from him. Nothing came, until one night when I least expected it showed up again. This time, he brought coffee. "You look better," he said. "I look bald." I shot back. He grinned. "Still better than when you pretended to sprain your ankle in 10th grade. I couldn't help but laugh. It felt normal, dangerous even. Ryan started coming more often after that. He'd show up unannounced, toss a candy bar onto my blanket, and say something stupid like, "Sugar's good for the soul." He'd tell me about his job at the mechanic's shop, his landlord's cat that hated him, the idiot customer who tried to pay with Monopoly money. I'd listen, because listening made me forget that my own body was trying to shut down. Sometimes, when the nurses weren't looking, he'd sneak me out to the rooftop. We'd sit under the stars, trading stories in silence, pretending that the city lights below were just another constellation made for us. It was during one of those nights that I said it again, the thing I swore I'd never repeat. "I still love you, you know?" He froze. For a second, I thought I'd ruined everything all over again. Then he exhaled, long and shaky. "I know." Just that. No confession, no denial. Just I know. And somehow it was enough. The thing about terminal illness is that it teaches you what people really mean when they say forever. For some, it's a lifetime. For others, it's a moment. Ryan became my forever in fragments, shared laughter in sterile rooms. A hand squeezing mine when the pain hit. The quiet, "Hey," he whispered each time he walked in, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to stay. He was always afraid of staying. And maybe he had a reason. I was fading. No amount of bravado or stubborn hope could change that. But he stayed anyway. One night, I woke up to find him asleep in the chair beside my bed, his head tilted, his jacket half falling off. I studied him for a long time, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the way his fingers twitched like he was still dreaming of running. I wanted to reach out, to wake him, to tell him I was sorry for everything I'd ever done to make him doubt me, to make him think this was all some elaborate act. But instead, I whispered, "Thank you." He didn't hear me. The next morning, I was gone before he arrived. They said I needed a transfer to a facility closer to the city for an experimental treatment. The doctors made the arrangements quickly. There wasn't time to call anyone, not even him. When Ryan came to the hospital that evening, my bed was already stripped, the sheets folded neatly. Only the wilted daisies he'd brought last week remained on the nightstand. The nurse told him I'd left that morning. No forwarding information. I imagine he stood there for a while silent, unmoving, the kind of silence that feels like a wound you can't bandage. A week later, I texted him. "I didn't fake this one, Ryan, but I'm still here. Somewhere." No reply, and maybe that was fair. After all, he'd loved a ghost once. I didn't want to make him do it again. But love has a strange way of finding its way back, even through the cracks of bad timing and broken hearts. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was just another pause before the universe decided we'd had enough of learning the hard way. Because somewhere under the same sky, Ryan was still looking up. And so was I. Ryan didn't go back to the hospital for a month. He told himself there was no point, that I'd probably transferred somewhere else, that I didn't want to be found. But the truth was simpler, couldn't stand the smell of antiseptic anymore. Couldn't stand the sight of empty beds, white walls, and the echo of my voice replaying in his head. He'd never said it out loud, but losing me had been his greatest fear. And Ryan Mitchell wasn't built to face fear, was built to outrun it. He went back to work like nothing happened. The same grease-stained overalls. The same grumpy boss yelling about deadlines. The same stupid playlist looping on the radio. But something in him had cracked. When the customers left, when the noise faded, he'd catch himself staring at the doorway waiting for a voice that never came. "Hey, mechanic boy, you still owe me that candy bar." Sometimes he almost heard it. The first snow of the season fell that December. It coated the parking lot outside the garage, muffling the world into a hush. Ryan stood there, a cigarette hanging between his lips, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. He didn't smoke, not really. He'd picked up the habit from a guy at work because it gave him an excuse to stand outside and think. He thought about me, about the way I'd smiled even when I was in pain, about how unfair it all felt, that people like me could love so fully and still have time snatched away. He thought about what I'd said the night on the rooftop. "I still love you, you know?" And how he'd said, "I know," because he was too damn scared to say it back. That night, when he got home, he found something waiting in his mailbox. A small, square envelope with no return address. His name written in neat, shaky handwriting. Inside was a postcard, a watercolor painting clearly mine. It showed a hospital rooftop at sunset, the city skyline bathed in gold. Two figures stood at the edge, one holding a bouquet of daisies. On the back, just one line. "You never stayed because I never asked you to. So this time I'm asking." And a scribbled address in San Francisco. Ryan didn't sleep that night. By dawn, he'd packed a bag, left a note for his boss, and hit the highway. It was a 6-hour drive, but he barely noticed the miles. The world blurred into stretches of asphalt and ghost towns. His chest tight with something he didn't dare name. The entire way, he replayed memories like an old film reel, the time I painted him asleep on the couch. The way I'd pretended to hate his laugh even though it always made me join in. The night I'd confessed, voice shaking, and he'd laughed because it was easier than admitting he felt the same. By the time the city came into view, the sun was bleeding orange across the bay. The air smelled like salt and coffee. For a moment, he almost felt alive again. The address led him to a small hospice tucked behind a park, framed by cypress trees. It didn't look like a place where people came to die. It looked like somewhere you'd come to find peace. He hesitated outside the gate, hands trembling. What if he was too late? What if all that was left was another empty bed? But then he saw me, sitting on a bench near the fountain, sketchbook on my lap, sunlight catching the edge of my buzz cut. Thinner, paler, but still unmistakably me. Alive. Ryan froze, heart stuttering. I looked up. Our eyes met across the garden. And for the first time in months, I smiled like I used to, like maybe the universe hadn't completely beaten me yet. He crossed the distance in seconds. Didn't say a word. Just dropped to his knees in front of me and pulled me into his arms. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I could feel his heartbeat against my cheek, rough and frantic, like it was trying to make up for lost time. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet. "You son of a bitch," he whispered. "You could have told me." "I wanted to," I said softly. "But you didn't answer my text." I didn't know what to say. I smiled faintly. "You could have started with 'Don't die.'" He let out a laugh, broken, wet, real. "Don't die, Noah. I'll try my best." The weeks that followed were a strange kind of grace. Ryan rented a tiny apartment near the hospice, started bringing me breakfast every morning, burnt bagels, cold coffee, whatever he could manage. The nurses adored him, said he was stubborn, loyal, impossible not to like. Sometimes, I'd wake up to find him reading aloud from my sketchbook, narrating his own ridiculous commentary. And here, the artist clearly tried to make me look handsome, but failed miserably. "Funny," I'd reply. "I was trying to draw a raccoon." He'd throw a pillow at me. I'd laugh until I couldn't breathe. But in between the jokes, there were moments of silence, raw, fragile ones where neither of us pretended things were fine. Like the night I couldn't stop coughing. Blood on my sleeve, panic in his eyes. He held me until the fit passed, whispering, "It's okay, you're okay," even when it wasn't. Or the morning he found me too weak to sit up, and for the first time he cried. Not the angry kind of tears, the kind that said he finally understood what it meant to lose something you never thought you'd deserve. "I hate this," he murmured, pressing his forehead against mine. "I hate that I can't fix it." "You don't have to fix it," I whispered. "Just be here." "I am." And he was. Every damn day. We fell back into rhythm, the kind that made time stretch and shrink all at once. He'd drive me to the pier on good days, wheel my chair down the boardwalk while I sketched strangers. We'd watch kids chase seagulls, listen to street musicians, steal fries from each other's baskets. Once, I caught him looking at me like he used to when we were younger, soft, reverent, terrified. Like I was something precious he didn't know how to hold. "What?" I teased. He shook his head. "You're still the most annoying person I've ever met." "That's not what your eyes are saying." He smirked. "Shut up." I didn't. One evening, as the sun dipped into the ocean, he handed me something, a small silver locket. Inside was a photo of us from high school. I'd drawn a heart around his face back then as a joke. "I found it in your old sketchbook," he said quietly. "You kept it." "Of course I did." He hesitated. "Noah, don't say it," I interrupted. "Why not?" "Because if you say it, it'll hurt more when I'm gone." His jaw tightened. "Don't talk like that. Ryan, I'm serious. You don't get to give up. Not now." I smiled sadly. "It's not about giving up. It's about making peace." He looked away, blinking fast. "You're impossible." "Yeah," I said softly. "That's why you love me." He didn't deny it this time. The next morning, he said it first. "I love you, Noah." 3 words. Simple, quiet, and heavier than anything I'd ever carried. I didn't cry. I just took his hand, tracing the lines of his palm like they were something sacred. "Took you long enough," I whispered. The days grew shorter after that, my body weaker, but something about Ryan's presence made it bearable. Like love was an anesthetic strong enough to numb the inevitable. He'd sit beside my bed, reading me stories I'd never finish, humming under his breath when I couldn't sleep. Sometimes, I'd wake to find him sketching me face, the window, the light on the floor. He wasn't any good at it, but I loved watching him try. "I think I finally get why you love art," he said one night. "It makes you remember what beauty feels like, even when everything else hurts." I smiled. "That's exactly it." One evening, A storm rolled in. The wind rattled the windows, the power flickered. Ryan sat by the bed, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. The monitors beeped softly in the background, each sound a reminder of how fragile this moment was. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "What?" "Loving me." I turned my head toward him. "Not even once." He swallowed hard. "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything." For a moment he couldn't speak. Then he leaned down, pressing his forehead against mine, his breath trembling. "I wish I could have been braver sooner." "You're brave now." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "You give me too much credit." "No," I whispered. "You just don't give yourself enough." We stayed like that for a long time, two hearts out of sync but still trying. The rain softened outside, the world slowing to a hush. And somewhere between one breath and the next, I realized something that almost made me smile. I wasn't afraid anymore. When I fell asleep that night, Ryan held my hand until morning. When I woke, he was still there, eyes closed, head resting on the edge of the bed. For a few precious minutes, everything felt suspended. No pain, no fear, just him and me exactly where we were meant to be. But life, as it always does, had other plans. That morning, my doctor came in with a new file. Results. Hope, maybe. The treatment was working slowly, but it was working. The remission odds weren't great, but they weren't zero anymore. When I told Ryan, he didn't believe me at first. Then he laughed a wild, relieved sound that startled the nurses. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack." He grabbed me, kissed my forehead, muttering, "I knew it. I knew you were too stubborn to die." I smiled into his shoulder. "Guess I learned that from you." The next few weeks blurred into cautious optimism. More tests, more treatments, more stolen moments of normalcy. Ryan never left my side. He started sketching again badly, adorably, and pinned his drawings all over my wall. "This one's you," he said, pointing to a stick figure with a halo. "Because apparently you're invincible." I laughed. "That's a circle, Ryan. Art is interpretive." "You're ridiculous." "Yeah, but you love me." Unfortunately. And maybe, just maybe, I did start to believe that we could have a future, that the story didn't have to end with hospital walls and whispered goodbyes. That maybe, for once, love was enough to keep the darkness at bay. Spring came quietly that year. Cherry blossoms bloomed along the edge of the hospice garden, their petals floating through the open windows like whispers of a promise the world was finally ready to keep. I'd been in remission for 3 weeks. My body still ached, my hair still thin, but there was color in my face again, something close to life. Ryan called it a miracle. I called it stubbornness. Every morning, he'd come by with coffee and too much energy, pretending the world wasn't fragile. He'd lean against my window ledge, talking about the garage, about his boss, about this stray cat that had started following him home. He made everything sound normal, and I clung to that normal like oxygen. Because after months of living at the edge of goodbye, normal felt like the most extraordinary thing in the world. One afternoon, I asked him to take me somewhere. "Anywhere but here," I said. "I'm tired of white walls." He smiled. "You sure you can handle it?" "I survived chemo, Ryan. I can survive your driving." He laughed, threw me his hoodie, and by evening, we were speeding down Highway 1, the Pacific stretching out beside us, gold under the setting sun. The wind whipped through the car, and for a while, I forgot what it felt like to be sick. I just felt alive. We stopped at a beach north of Monterey. Empty, quiet, the kind of place that made the world feel infinite. Ryan grabbed a blanket, threw it on the sand, and we lay there, side by side, watching the waves break. It was the first time I'd seen the ocean since before I got sick. It looked exactly the same. I didn't. "Do you ever think about before?" I asked softly. He turned his head toward me. "Before what?" "Before we knew what we were." He smiled faintly. "You mean before I was an idiot?" I chuckled. "Yeah, that." He went quiet for a moment, his eyes tracing the horizon. "I used to think it wasn't real, what we had back then. I thought it was just confusion. The way teenage years mess with your head. And now, he looked at me, really looked. Now I think it was the only thing that ever made sense. The air between us grew still. The kind of stillness that hums with unspoken truth. When he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. His fingers were warm, calloused, grounding. I closed my eyes and let the world fade, let the sound of the sea and the rhythm of his breathing sink into one quiet heartbeat. I'm scared, I admitted. Of what? Of getting better, of living. What if I survive and I don't know what to do with it? Ryan squeezed my hand gently. Then we figure it out together. Together? I repeated, tasting the word like it was new. He smiled. You still owe me a lifetime of burnt coffee and bad jokes. I'll start practicing now. We stayed on that beach until the stars came out. I don't remember who leaned in first, only that it felt inevitable the moment our lips met, soft and trembling, the ocean roaring like applause behind us. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was something quieter, deep air, a promise written between two people who'd already lost too much. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine. You don't get to leave me again, he murmured. I wasn't planning to. Good, because I'm done running. The next few months were a slow climb back to something resembling life. The doctors cleared me for discharge. The hospice staff threw a tiny party with cupcakes and a balloon that said you did it. Ryan showed up late, covered in engine grease, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers and the biggest grin I'd ever seen. You clean up nice, I teased. He winked. You should see me on prom night. Oh wait, you were too busy pretending to faint in front of me. I told you I was dehydrated. He laughed. You were in love, Noah. Still am. The room went quiet for a second, everyone pretending not to have heard. Then Ryan leaned down and kissed the top of my head, gentle, easy, like breathing. Good, he said. Me too. We moved in together a month later. Not because it was romantic, though it was, but because my lease had expired and Ryan said his apartment had space for another smartass. It was a shoebox over a laundromat that smelled faintly of detergent and burnt toast. The shower rattled, the heater wheezed, and there was a family of pigeons living outside the window. It was perfect. We painted the walls a soft blue. I filled them with my art. Ryan filled the kitchen with tools he swore were for repairs. But really, he just liked tinkering. Every night, we'd eat takeout on the floor and talk about everything and nothing until the city lights faded. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night and just watch him sleep, the rise and fall of his chest a quiet miracle. And I'd think this is what surviving is for. But healing isn't linear. Some days I still woke up afraid, still flinched when I saw blood drawn, still caught the faint scent of bleach and felt like I was back in that hospital bed. Ryan noticed, of course. He always did. He never tried to fix it. He just held me through it. Once, during a particularly bad night, he whispered, "You don't owe anyone strength, you know. You already proved enough just by staying." And I believed him. For the first time, I truly did. That summer, I started painting again. Real paintings, not just sketches in hospital notebooks. Canvas after canvas of sunlight and ocean and city streets colors I thought I'd forgotten how to see. Ryan built me an easel out of scrap wood from the garage. It wobbled. I loved it. You think anyone would buy these? I asked one night, staring at the half-finished piece in front of me. He shrugged. Who cares if they do? Paint because you want to remember what living looks like. I smiled. You say things like that and then act surprised when I fall in love with you again. He grinned. That's the plan. By fall, I had my first small exhibition. Nothing fancy, just a local cafe downtown that agreed to hang my paintings for a month. Ryan spent the whole evening bragging to strangers that he was the muse. You're the guy who kept eating my fries during chemo, I corrected him. Yeah, same thing. He stood beside me as people drifted through the cafe, eyes catching on the painting I'd titled The Rooftop. The same view from that first hospital night, the skyline, the sunset, two figures standing apart but connected by light. Someone asked what it meant. Ryan looked at me. I smiled. It's about believing someone even when they've stopped believing themselves. Later, after everyone left, we sat outside with hot chocolate, the city humming softly around us. "You did it," Ryan said. "We did it." He chuckled. "You know, sometimes I think about how different things would have been if I just believed you that first day." I shook my head. "If you had, we wouldn't be here. We needed to break to find the pieces that mattered." He was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "You're too good for this world." I smiled. That's the nicest way anyone's ever called me a pain in the ass. Months turned into a year. The tests kept coming back clean. My hair grew back. Life began to feel like something I could trust again. Ryan and I built a routine, messy, chaotic hours. Sunday drives, midnight grocery runs, too many burnt pancakes and not enough sleep. We fought sometimes, made up more times, learned that love wasn't about avoiding the storm but holding on through it. And through it all, there was gratitude. Every laugh, every touch, every morning sunlight streaming across our bed, it all felt borrowed and blessed. On our second anniversary, Ryan drove me back to the same beach. The wind was sharp, the waves louder, but it was the same stretch of sand where we'd kissed under the stars. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. My heart stuttered. "Noah," he said, voice unsteady. "I don't have a ring, because you'd probably judge me for the metalwork." I laughed through the tears that already burned in my eyes. "You're ridiculous." He smiled, kneeling in the sand. "Maybe, but I spent half my life not knowing what love looked like. Then you showed me. And I want hell. I need to spend whatever time we've got left making sure you never forget it." The world blurred around ustled air, crashing waves, trembling hands. "Yes," I whispered before he even asked. "Of course, yes." He didn't put a ring on my finger. He slipped a small, handmade silver band around a string and tied it around my wrist instead. "Stronger than gold," he said. "It's crooked," I teased. "So are we," he replied. "That's what makes us perfect." We didn't need a wedding. We already had what mattered, each other, and the quiet understanding that life could end any day, so we might as well fill it with something worth remembering. Years later, I painted one final piece, a panoramic view of that hospital rooftop. But this time, there was only one figure standing there facing the sunrise. Not in grief, in gratitude, because love doesn't disappear when the body heals. It lingers, changes, grows roots. When I showed it to Ryan, he stared for a long time before saying softly, "That's the day you stop dying." "No," I said, smiling. "That's the day I started living." He kissed me then, slow and sure, like every beginning and every ending finally met in the middle. And if you asked me years later how our story ended, I'd tell you this: it didn't. It just kept changing shape like light on water, like laughter in dark rooms, like two boys who learned too late and loved anyway. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories aren't about the people who survive. They're about the people who stay. And Ryan stayed. Always. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.